we're going to speak on a very serious topic. It's very important to all of you as consumers and biohackers, but it's also important to some of our vendors that are here and salespeople and all the neat lotions, potions, and exciting products that they have. And we're going to talk about biohacking at the Crossroads, a global health span revolution amid regulatory upheaval. So those of you that thought they were going to hear from Dr. Bernie Siegel, the cancer expert, I'm the lawyer Bernie Siegel. I'm the Bernie Siegel with hair. And I've been involved, however, with science for 22 years. A little bit background to let you know where I'm coming from. The seriousness of the subject matter, which is either going to be the greatest thing that ever happened for biohacking or an extinction event with the change of politics that we have. This is a apolitical talk, but a serious one. So I used to practice law in Miami for 27 years, and I've been a member of the Florida Bar for half a century. But 22 years ago, I filed a case that changed my life forever. A group in Hollywood, Florida claimed they cloned a baby. It was the Raelian movement, and this had set off great fireworks around the world. Well, what had happened with the Raelians is, at the time, cloning, the sledgehammer term cloning, and reproductive cloning was being used as a pretext to halt something called embryonic stem cell research. And there were attempts all over the United States and the world, not only to ban unethical reproductive cloning, but also therapeutic cloning or a form of stem cell research. I filed the case and it debunked the cloning claim. The details of it are well known and I'm not going to explain it. But by doing that, I was thrust in the limelight as a regular civilian lawyer, as someone that was defending freedom of scientific research. And I was asked to join the scientists at the first International Society for Stem Cell Research that was meeting. And the leading scientists of the world, like Dolly the sheep's father, Ian Wilmot, Rudolf Janisch, Doug Melton, a diabetes stem cell researcher from Harvard, joined the Science Advisory Board and encouraged me to be an advocate. Well, the reason I decided to leave my practice and create the Genetics Policy Institute that later morphed into the Regenerative Medicine Foundation, the reason I did that is because as a younger guy at 48, I had colon cancer, all right? Some of you here know what it's like to be stricken with something serious as that at a young age, or fairly young age, and I'm many years later, I'm around and kicking, but as many people who have suffered a blow like that and had a difficult year, as I did, I decided I could do anything with my life. And what I chose to do, when the scientists applauded that I had stood up for legitimate science, I chose to throw my hat in the ring and become a full-time patient advocate. Someone had to do it. And when I went to the first meeting of the stem cell scientists in Washington, D.C., you know, I was the only civilian there. And I saw myself as a patient advocate and someone who wanted to see legitimate science advance for freedom of scientific research. So in the past 22 years, the Regenerative Medicine Foundation created a meeting called the World Stem Cell Summit. And the World Stem Cell Summit had scientists, it had lawmakers, politicians, biotech, investors, but most importantly, patient advocates. And that group has been the motivating force for a tremendous amount of funding and progress. So when we think about health span and longevity and well-being, one of the pillars is stem cells and regenerative medicine. So before we talk about the politics involved and the new government and what it is, I want to reflect on a few minutes just to put some perspective on this. So I doubt all of you look very young. Maybe it's the lights. Some of you might have heard of a book called Future Shock. Future Shock was published all the way back in 1970, sometime like I'm mid-century modern myself, okay? So this book influenced me when I was in college as a young person. And to understand the perspective of where the world is now, if you'll allow me to just read a point, because Future Shock basically said the world was going to change absolutely incredibly in the next 50 or 100 years. Everything that we knew in 1970 was going to change. Every perception will be changed and different. So he quoted someone by the name of Kenneth Boulding, who was an eminent economist, who said, have to find the right bookmark, thank you. As far as many statistical series related to activities of mankind are concerned, the date that divides human history into two equal parts is well within living memory. Our century represents the great median strip running down the center of human history. It's been observed, for example, that the last 50,000 years of man's existence were divided into lifetimes of 62 years each. There have been about 800 lifetimes. Of these 800, fully 650 were lived in caves. Only during the last 70 lifetimes has it been possible to communicate effectively from one lifetime to another, as writing has made it possible to do. Only during the last 6 lifetimes did masses of men ever see a printed word. Only during the last 4 has it been possible to measure time with any precision. Only in the last 2 has anyone anywhere used an electric motor. And the overwhelming majority of all material goods that we use daily in life today have been developed within the present, our 800th lifetime. Then Toffler says, now imagine not merely an individual, but an entire society, an entire generation, including its weakest, least intelligent, and most irrational members, suddenly transported into this new world. The result is mass disorientation and future shock on a grand scale. And I appreciate you listening to that, because where we were in 1970 and where my parents were compared to the world today, just in the 21st century, are unimaginable. And what the future technologies bring with AI and all the converging technologies, who in the world is ready for it? What are we going to see? It's profound, and it's a little scary. Now, I was having an interesting conversation out on the floor there with someone. We were talking about the incoming administration. We were talking about the dangers of pandemics or another pandemic. This individual proudly said, I wasn't vaccinated. I know people who are vaccinated who got COVID. He was adamant. He's a good biohacker and he's a great guy, but he is convinced that we don't have anything to worry about. So I'm showing you a book that I read when the COVID broke out that was profound. It was called Spillover, okay? Spillover, Animal Infections in the Next Human Pandemic. That was written before COVID. And right now, a bunch of ducks in Central Park are dying, right? It was in the news. Bird flu, or whatever pandemic will come next. But the point is we, as advanced as we were at the time, that was a real crisis. And it's interesting that in record time, the Trump administration did something called Operation Warp Speed that brought and accelerated something that would have taken decades and almost overnight into vaccines. And I lost people who died in COVID, and I know of others. And I know people who believed in the vaccines and have taken it. And I know people don't like vaccines. Some people really don't like it. It's their choice. Even RFK Jr. said that. But it's interesting that the person that worked all these years studying RNA, or mRNA, who developed the basic code that was the breakthrough, was a Hungarian-born scientist, Katalin Karikó. And Katalin grew up in Hungary, impoverished, absolutely impoverished during the communist era. Didn't even have running water. They had to use an outhouse. But she was of intelligent stock, and she worked and labored in obscurity for her entire career on something called mRNA. And that was the breakthrough technology that created these vaccines. And you know, vaccines have been challenging for years. The church years ago, they opposed vaccines. They opposed hygiene. The formal church opposed a lot of things, astronomy. But here we are in the 21st century, and we are as vulnerable now as the world has ever been with the population we have. So in talking about the context of what we're concerned about, I wanted just to read you a little passage from Katalin Karikó's book. She won the Nobel Prize for Medicine for the work that she had done. And we're going to talk about the human cell, because some of the speakers, the scientists that you've spoken, and the health gurus, they talk about cellular therapy, rejuvenating your cells. And I believe that we will be able to reverse aging one day through cells. And you heard Dr. Ian White talk about the Yamanaka factors, that we could take a skin cell, I could take one of your skin cells and insert these factors, so it would no longer be a skin cell, but could develop into any cell type of your human body. It's a storehouse for drug development to match your own DNA, growing organoids to study so we don't have to inject things in human beings for basic research. Incredible things like precision medicine based on these cells. So she wrote about the cell. Every cell is like a sci-fi city that never sleeps. It thrums with activity. Nearly all of your cells contain a staggeringly sophisticated factories that manage thousands of products via round-the-clock assembly lines, complex transportation systems, packaging and shipping centers more efficiently than FedEx. Power plants generate vast amount of energies, and waste management centers ensure nothing unnecessary hangs around and nothing goes to waste. Inside your cells, complex codes are encrypted, sealed, shuttled, decrypted, and broken down. Only with the touch, that one special key, do locked gates open and close. There's surveillance networks to watch for invaders. They pounce when they find one. You know how many cells we have in our body? When I first started talking about this, and believe me, my 10th grade biology teacher was and is surprised with what I do. She's well in her 90s, but I called her up and asked her if she was surprised, and she remembered me because I was such a poor student in biology in 10th grade, and she said she was surprised at what I do today. Well, at the time when I started this, they said there were 6 trillion cells in the human body. Now they say there are 36 trillion cells in the human body. Did everyone get fat? I don't know. That's how modern science works. But each one of these microscopic tiny cells is an engine, There's nothing simple about this. There are geniuses that are working, cell biologists that are working on this, that have devoted their careers and are going to come through with breakthrough treatments. All right, well, we talked about future shock. Let's just talk about a shock to the system. Are we going to make America healthy again? And it's really important, especially to the biohacking community, to look at RFK Jr.'s quote that has shaken up a lot of Washington, shaken up a lot of science that's going on. FDA's war on public health is about to end. This includes its aggressive suppression of psychedelics, peptides, stem cells, raw milk, hyperbaric therapies, chelating compounds, ivermectin, hydrochloroquine, vitamins, clean foods, sunshine and exercise, nutraceuticals, and anything else that advances human health that can't be patented by pharma. If you work for the FDA and are part of this corrupt system, I have two messages for you. Preserve those records and pack your bags. So said RFK, who's now our Director of Health and Human Services. We don't have anything to worry about, right? You tell him, RFK Jr. Well, there's always two sides to a story. And I would suggest to you that the hacking of the FDA, and especially the National Institutes of Health and the CDC, we should do a cost-benefit analysis. I'd really like to see that first. And Marty McCreary, who's going to be our next director of FDA, hasn't even been appointed yet and hasn't gone through his approval process in the Senate. But you know what? He's a good choice. He's a good choice. The books that he's written points out the problems with the medical system and the problems with the regulatory system. And I assure you that we must have a streamlined regulatory system to keep up with innovation, and we don't. So there's a good point, and if you look at the list of things that RFK talks about, what is he talking about? Take a walk through the exhibit floor here. There are offerings now being presented in all of this field. Now I'll tell you something. If I were a veteran or a first responder and I am on a suicide watch right now, I'd be concerned. I'd be concerned about the VA. I'd be concerned about access. So we shouldn't, in part of the biohacker community, be dancing on the roof yet. We don't know what the outcome is going to be. We don't know the next pandemic, whether it'll be worse. We don't know about the next existential crisis, but for all I know, it could be the singularity and AI. So the biohacking ecosystem, I don't have to explain to this audience, but I wanted to let you think about it as wearables, supplements and smart drugs, implants, chips, bioelectronic implants for health and monitoring, self-experimentation is gaining traction, gene modification kits, mobile apps, therapies and clinics. A lot of these clinics are involved in the longevity space. And to tell you, in the 22 years of running the Regenerative Medicine Foundation and putting on 30 and conceptualizing with teams 30 conferences around the world, what I came to realize is that the complexity of our universe requires everyone on board. And what the driving force is the consumer movement, of which the biohacking community is. Absolutely important. The field is changing. So most recently, we created another nonprofit organization called the Healthspan Action Coalition. The Healthspan Action Coalition was founded by Melissa King, who was the first executive director of the California Institute for Regenerative Medicine, and also a colleague who's here, a young woman who suffered as a young age, became a quadriplegic in a car accident, Sabrina Cohen. And we thought about where the money is going in longevity science, where the money is coming from, the resources in the anti-aging field and the longevity field to live a longer life is great. And you know, I've been part of the vitalism movement. I spoke to a very nice person. They asked, Bernie, do you want to die? I didn't know it was a test. Well, you know, I don't want to die. I'm thinking about Woody Allen. Woody Allen said, you know, I don't mind dying, I just don't want to be there when it happens. Well, apparently I passed the test. So now I get a lot of information from people who want to live forever. I have information on the cryonics movement and a lot of interesting stuff. But the money being poured into that, and especially from Silicon Valley, is very interesting. But they're not going to get to the finish line. And the reason they're not going to get to the finish line, folks, the reason is that they don't have the public support. If you say that we want to live just a longer life, it doesn't do it. But if you have been paralyzed or a young person, as I was told by my colleague Sabrina, and you're part of that community, you're concerned about not only the length of your life, but you have accelerated aging. So I attempted to create a map for you, a roadmap, biohacking and Healthspan. And it's a little complicated. In the middle of that world, you'll see the center of our universe. And I'm considering biohacking and biohackers as part of the Healthspan movement. And that's the Healthspan Action Coalition that we created. That has now 250 organizations involved. Everything from the Diabetes Research Institute Foundation to the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundations, the tiny groups that are just a family trying to support their neuro-damaged child, to biotech, cutting-edge biotech, and investors, and media and journals. 250 in 2 years. That came about, by the way, if some of you have heard of Aubrey de Grey, Aubrey is probably a pathfinder of things called negligible senescence strategies for negligible senescence. He's a guy that looks like Gandalf with a long beard, but he has helped create the field of ending aging. And a biogerontologist, got his degree in UK and Cambridge. Aubrey and I were speaking, and we said if we could create a nonprofit that would bring this world together, we could create a global movement. And in 2 years, we're doing it. So this is a representative of a global movement. And where does biohacking fit in? You'll see it towards the top, the center around the biohacking and Healthspan. Influencers, think about Brian Johnson, some of the people that you've heard today, people that are doing experiments, patients of like one person to do this. That's really significant. And a field is dominated by influencers, people like Dr. David Sinclair, Andrew Steele, others that you know, Nir Barzilai. And they go to conferences all the time, and they speak to themselves very often because they know each other's talks. But it's an insular field. But the scientists themselves that are working in their silos, whether it's in diabetes, spinal cord injury, Parkinson's disease, each of those specialties matter. The enterprise of science, I submit to you, lifts all boats. And if someone is working in diabetes, they may have a breakthrough using mesenchymal stem cells from fat. And these products that they're trying to move forward have to find a way to get to the regulatory system many times, or else they're going to have to, and it might cost as much as getting a pharmaceutical or drug. These are cells in our body. That doesn't seem right, and it doesn't seem smart. So biohacking comes up against medical specialties, or is embraced by medical specialties, academic centers and programs, advocacy groups and coalitions like the Healthspan Action Coalition, and advocacy groups. The US government, well, you know, I believe that the National Institutes of Health makes the United States empowered. There are geopolitical ramifications to that. There are networks that have been developed for years with the National Institutes of Health. It is probably the greatest engine of scientific research in medicine in the history of our species. That's not my line. It originated, I first heard from stem cell scientist Irv Weissman and Dr. Weissman at Stanford. And when you look at the institutions that have received funding, and yes, there are overhead expenses, but there are networks that are so valuable. So in the interest of cutting cost, if we lose the National Institutes of Health, reform is needed. Trust me, there's waste. Trust me, there's there. I've heard the stories and the inside stories. But you don't cut the root system. If we cut the root system, I think it's going to make the United States, personally, I think, a second-rate country. And believe me, the rest of the world is pouring money into biotechnical research. So we think about the international government and the World Health Organization. Did you know that the latest ICD-11 disease classification calls aging the greatest risk factor is recognized the greatest risk factor for chronic disease. Aging in the new code is a treatable medical condition. They call it a medical condition. We treat medical conditions. There's no reimbursement for any of the things that you see at the Biohacking Conference right now. There's no way that some of the breakthroughs that we're hearing in laboratories around the world are going to be paid for by this, yet there are no codes to get reimbursement. And like it or not, there are a lot of people depend on whether it's Medicare, Medicaid, or just general insurance coverage to move this forward. And you can go around the circle and think about the ethical issues, the insurance, the economics, the investment in some of the companies here. Some of the companies presenting here are in need of money and need to advance things, or are being challenged by the regulatory system as it stands. And around that, there are even more things to consider. Space, science and microgravity, so Elon can go to Mars and survive. AI and machine learning. That's either going to be the greatest thing for humanity or an existential risk. And let me tell you, the jury's out on that. So all of these things matter. Workforce development, how is going to train our technical workforce to do the things that we need to do in biohacking. This is an ecosystem of which you are involved. You have a say-so. And we, as a country, need to be smart about. So in my world, stem cells, all right, that can turn into any type of tissue in the human body, was really hijacked more in the abortion debate in the United States, Roe versus Wade. And the field was being restricted. When I first became involved with the stem cell scientists, there was an effort in the United Nations, largely led by, at that time, the Bush administration and the Vatican, that was going to get a treaty, not only to ban, a world treaty to ban unethical reproductive cloning of babies, but it was being used to close out some promising embryonic stem cell research called somatic cell nuclear transfer. And it was deliberately written to crush that science at the time. So I actually led a movement in the United Nations, created a conference in the United Nations to teach the UN the difference between the true science of stem cells and the hysteria of human cloning at that time. 6 months before I presented a meeting to the UN, I was invited by Christopher Reeve to come to his house. This was 6 months before he passed away. And we filmed a video which we played to the United Nations, first at the conference, the science conference, and later, 6 months later, just weeks after he died, Christopher died, at a press conference at the United Nations that presented patients. My colleague is in the back, Sabrina Cohen, was at the conference we did at the United Nations. And the message was, this science represented hope. And I'll tell you, if you crush hope, you destroy morale, and you get a counterforce. And that was a movement that went, and with the World Stem Cell Summit in part, of a global community that favored stem cell research. And that, my friends, turned into a consumer movement. Because consumers, just like the biohacking movement, you might not know the technical science and medicine behind biohacking and the technologies involved, but you don't see it as just a general health issue or a public health issue. All of you, as I do, see it as a personal health issue, something to help us, helping to help our loved ones and our friends. And that's what morphed into the stem cell movement. So my third colleague that I started the Healthspan Action Coalition with was Melissa King. Melissa King was the first executive director of something called the California Stem Cell, it was called the California Institute for Regenerative Medicine. In 2004, we worked on a campaign that raised $3 billion of taxpayer money, a ballot initiative that was overwhelmingly improved because the field of stem cells was being held back. And this was a brand new institute, unlike any in the world. As Justice Louis Brandeis said, the states, American states, are the laboratories of democracy. Well, they might be the laboratories moving forward. If the feds get out of it, we'll be relying on the states. But anyway, Prop 14 created something nowhere else in the world. And California is where the booming biotechnology still exists. And then Melissa, my colleague and friend, led the field operations of Prop 14 in 2020. And you know what? I was on the board of a 5-person board that ran that campaign, and we raised another $5.5 billion and $15 billion of California taxpayer money. And it was democratic, not democratic like Democratic Party. It was a democracy. People voted for this and approved it. And they've created an institute that's so valuable now, that's creating workforce development through its Bridges program, that it has made California a centerpiece around the world for this pillar of longevity research. So the problem that we have with a lot of these technologies is illustrated by this model. Think of it as a Greek temple. Now, this came from a colleague of mine, Chris Mason, and his associate, David Brenly, who wrote about cellular therapy industry as a billion-dollar global business with unlimited potential. $1 billion. Right now, it's billions and billions and billions. This was written in 2011. And what it shows is pharmaceuticals, biologics, medical devices, and we all know the expense and time that goes into creating an approved product that's proven safe and effective. Billions of dollars sometimes, decades. But there's an infrastructure built for that. The FDA, through all these years, that protects us from snake oil, right, built an infrastructure. And this infrastructure gave approval process. But cell therapies, they stuck it in the same infrastructure. And that has cost and challenged the field to bloom. There's so many potential therapies, so many things that have generally been proven safe with real-world evidence, but it's stymied. These things are possibly curative, not just be treated with synthetic molecules, but curative. But there's no infrastructure. There's no reimbursement for this. There's no code for this. And without this, cell therapies and gene therapies are tremendously challenged. And that's why we see stem cell clinics, because stem cell clinics are now basically consumer-driven. Your local chiropractor might try to sell a stem cell to you. Probably a very, very bad idea. So you as consumers have to be very careful about the stem cell treatment that any of you take, and that's a side story I could give you. Here's a sinister looking picture of what the FDA looked like in Reputation and Power. It's a very powerful and interesting book. And understand the reasons why the FDA became the FDA, and the thalidomide crisis where little kids and babies in the early 60s were born without arms and legs. And what about the safety and efficacy? So there's a reason the system has evolved as it has. But we are behind, so behind other jurisdictions that are moving this field rapidly forward. And this is an emergency. And we have tools now that we should be able to use. Technology, the AI, the oncoming AI, perception, transformation. The FDA was evolving. It was evolving. We passed the 21st Century Cures Act. We got the FDA, compelled the FDA to consider regenerative medicine treatments early on, to consult with the FDA so they wouldn't just spin their wheels. That was a good thing, but it was not enough. That was not enough. So what we're going to have in the future, folks, we have no idea what's coming. We don't know. I suggest to you that, as RFK Jr. suggested, that stem cells have been slowed. But if all the barriers are removed, all those warning letters that have been sent to bogus clinics, they're not going to be enforced. Do you think the Justice Department is going to try to shut down these clinics? There are other priorities. So what that puts on your heads is the consumer side of it. You have to be smart. You have to answer the questions. Right now, all I can tell you is we're going to have massive change, and we don't know where it's going yet. So I was thinking about this talk, and when you're walking around the exhibit floor, I drew up with the assistance of AI, perplexity.ai. That's my favorite way. You can get ChatGPT and Grok and all of them in one app. $20 a month, you won't have to look up anything on the internet. You can even get restaurant reviews. But there are general questions all of you should ask when you walk around. What is the treatment? How does it work? What are the expected benefits for my specific condition or goals? What are the risks and potential side effects to putting that schmutz on my face? What is the success rate of this treatment? Will my progress be monitored, and what follow-up care is required? What are the costs involved, and are there any payment plans or insurance coverage? You owe it to yourselves to ask tough questions. There's good stuff out there. How about that coffee? It was delicious. All right, and by the way, I disagree totally with our first speaker that says don't drink coffee in the morning. If I didn't have coffee in the morning and an espresso in the afternoon, that's my self-medication, but that's just me. You have to answer these questions. So if you are looking for this consumer guide, you can scan the Healthspan Action Code website. We posted it online, so I won't go through all this. But there are questions that you ask before you get a stem cell therapy, a peptide therapy, for biohacking and devices. All of these are common sense, but you should be an aware consumer. I was motivated to do this as a calling. We've heard some inspirational speakers today. There was no way that in my life where I used to come home and cheerfully say to my wife, I feel great today, I sued someone today. Because that was it. I had my own law firm. I was working in the courthouse in Miami. I did all sorts of types of cases. But the one case that I did file, I did it, no one was paying me to do it, but I did it because I saw a group make a hysterical claim that was shutting down stem cell research, and I decided to put it to the test in court. It's a good yarn, and I did a TEDx talk. I'm not going to give you the details. But that changed my life forever. It's like everything that I was interested in as a major in history and political science. I grew up as an only child and overprotected, and I say I was raised in a library. It was a rainy Sunday, and I'd get out the World Book Encyclopedia and say, I'm going to read letter K today. I was interested in everything. And what I was able to do when the leading scientists came to me and said, Bernie, we need your help, and looking at them and thinking, you're concerned about being shut down, and I'm the only patient advocate in this science meeting, what's wrong with this picture? It was common sense. So I took the attitude like Mary Lasker. Mary Lasker, the American Cancer Society, the Lasker Award, took cancer research to another level. It was the model of everything that's come since in trying to cure cancer. And she said, because of her life experiences, I'm opposed to heart attacks and cancer and strokes the way I'm opposed to sin. I like that. We should be opposed to it. We should be opposed to the human suffering that's there. The other thing I wanted to say, and I believe this, and I found this, power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did and never will. Frederick Douglass said that, the great abolitionist. Think about it. We can passively say we want change, but unless we raise our voices and make a demand, change doesn't happen. We were successful in the UN. We were successful in California. We supported meritorious research around the world. This is a global movement. and it's moving forward, and we must make the demand. Finally, there's Honest Abe. Good president. Public sentiment is everything. With public sentiment, nothing can fail. Without it, nothing can succeed. All right? That was the key as my own views as a civilian stem cell advocate, as proponents of the biohacking world, which represents self-actualization and autonomy and freedom. This is your world. And how do you recruit the general public to feel confident in what's being offered to us as individuals, as patients, for ourselves and our loved ones? All right? It requires public sentiment. I put up this slide just because I like the slide. It's a little baby, an adorable baby. And it was a picture from a press release of UC Davis, world's first stem cell treatment for spina bifida delivered during fetal surgery. Do you know the science now in newborns and doing genetic testing on newborns is discovering so many little babies harboring a potential genetic disease or a genetic defect? The technologies that are here today are absolutely extraordinary. They're mind-bending. This is future shock come to life, right? As my parents and grandparents lived, the world today is incomprehensible. Believe me, when I try to do things with my apps, sometimes the world today is incomprehensible to me. But that's okay. I'm living in this world, and I'm proud and happy to be in it, and I'm going to embrace the change and hope for the best, whether it comes from Washington, from the laboratories around the world, or even from the biohackers. So I want to thank you for listening to this. It turned out to be a very serious audience. I want you to scan this and understand something about the Healthspan Action Coalition. For a while, I still am proud to run the Regenerative Medicine Foundation and the World Stem Cell Summit that I've temporarily put on the shelf, because believe me, setting up a global meeting is hard work, and I don't feel like I want to travel very much anymore. So that's on the shelf. I salute Sandy Martin. Sandy Martin, who knows how to promote an event. Thank you for Sandy for bringing all of us together. Now, when you go to the Healthspan Action Coalition, you can click on the coalition, and you'll see 250 organizations, or close to it. It'll be 250 in about a week or two. And then you can decide whether your organization, if it's meritorious, fits in, and it doesn't cost anything. We vet it, and if you're doing things that are not bad actors or something that's harmful, if you have the right spirit, we welcome you to join this 50c3. And what you will see, is we have developed some really important science advisory boards. Ian White, who you heard from today, is on one of our science advisory boards for the Healthspan Action Coalition. Dr. Anthony Atala at Wake Forest Institute for Regenerative Medicine. Dr. Camillo Riccordi, the head of the Diabetes Research Institute for years, who's written the book, The Healthspan Code. Jean Loring, an expert on induced pluripotent stem cells, those Yamanaka cells. She's going to find a cure through her company, Aspen Neuroscience, for Parkinson's. You'll see patient groups, you'll see groups and names that you're familiar with. So I say join the cause. Please reach out to me. I'll be around for this whole event. I have material at a table, but I might not be sitting at the table out there. I forget what the booth is, but you'll see material to scan and to pick up a brochure on the Healthspan Action Coalition. And I want to thank you for your attention, and we do have the peers 2 minutes for questions if there are any. Thank you. Very good. Thank you very much.